first opportunity to speak, and so I want to thank you for evaluating today's round. Definitely look forward to the feedback we'll get from you. And to Adam, he's been someone that's been a friend for a long time and an excellent debater, and I always enjoy the opportunity to debate with him. Memento mori, a Latin phrase from the Crusades meaning remember, you will die. Today in the U.S., for the lower economic class, that comes unfortunately quick. A 2009 Harvard Medical School study found that for uninsured working age Americans, they have a 40% higher risk of death, translating into 44,789 excess deaths per year. And it's because of this that I stand firmly resolved that the U.S. federal government should significantly reform health care. We began with a resolutional analysis. By significantly reform, we're advocating for the increase in coverage via a new system altogether, a universal health care model based on that of Germany, a single-payer sort of model. For the weighing mechanism, what's best for the American people, and we evaluate this in terms of access, care, quality, and affordability, because that, after all, is what our American system of healthcare should be about. Contention number one are the problems. The North Carolina Medical Journal in January of 2018 noted that in the U.S. we spend $3 trillion a year in total expenses on health care. Versus our peers, we have the lowest life expectancy of birth, the highest infant mortality, and a higher presence of chronic diseases. UCLA in 2017 noted that the U.S. is 22nd out of 27 countries in their 17-year study. For every $100 spent in the U.S., it equates to 15 extra days of life. For example, in Germany, for every $100 spent, 4 months. We're not getting the bang for the buck. Contention two is Germany, the comparison. The OECD data from 2016 notes that Germany spends $4,297 per citizen, compared to in the U.S., $9,892 per citizen. By comparison, that's 11.3% of GDP for Germany versus 17.2% of GDP in the US. We're spending more. So what do we get in result for that additional expense? 5-year cervical cancer rates in Germany, 65.2%. In the US, 62.6%. 5-year leukemia survival rates in Germany, 91.1%. In the US, 89.5%. Number of people that skip treatment due to expense in the US, 19.8%. In Germany, 4.4%. We're clearly not getting more for our money. We're getting less for our money. We need the single payer system. Now, contention three is answering the myths that are associated with it. Common to hear the myth of rationing. The OECD data from July of 2016 notes that, in fact, you have greater availability, greater access in the German model. Germany has 4.1 doctors per 100,000 of population, which is a greater ratio than that in the United States. But there is one key area where rationing does occur. When you look to the Journal of the American Medical Association from March 13th of 2018, in Germany, they only spend 2% of their healthcare budget on administrative costs. In the US, it's 8%. So are we going to ration something? Yes. It's ration the red tape so that we can put the focus back upon the patient, we can put the focus back upon the citizen, and not face that 40% higher risk of death just because we happen to be working age and lacking coverage at that point in time. This will be a challenge, but it's a challenge worth rising to. As Walter Cronkite once said, America's healthcare system is neither healthy, caring, nor a system. It's time that we get serious. It's time that we get it right. And that's why for the first time today, I ask that you concur and side with the affirmative, and I'll now stand open for cross-examination.
You mentioned, Bob, that in Germany it's 4.1 doctors to every 1 patient, correct?
4.1 doctors for every 100,000 citizens.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I thought that was a lot of doctors.
Yeah.
Okay. And what is the U.S. ratio?
I don't have the exact number, but the data said that it was a greater ratio than that in the U.S., but unfortunately I don't have that.
So does that mean there are more doctors per 100,000, or does that mean there are more people per doctor?
If there were more, that 4.1 was higher. Now, admittedly, it could be minor. It could be 4.0, 3.9. I don't know the number. I just know that it was anything.
But you don't actually know how many doctors there are compared to citizens, right?
4.1 for every 100,000 citizens.
Well, not, I mean, in the U.S.
No, just that it's a number that's less than that.
Okay, excellent. What is the population of Germany?
I honestly don't know that number off the top of my head.
What is the population of the United States?
It's significantly higher.
Okay. And are are you familiar that statistics that work in small sample sizes don't always translate to large sample
Well,
sizes?
if we were looking at a healthcare system in Monroe, Louisiana, and saying that'll work for the country, maybe. But this is a nation state and a large, one of the largest economies on the planet. And so,
Okay, if Texas seceded from the Union, wouldn't it be both larger than Germany, have a higher population than Germany, and a higher GDP than Germany?
I honestly don't know the data on Texas to compare.
Okay. Does the entire European Union use one single payer system, or does each country have one?
Each nation state still has their opportunity to shape their system.
So if it's a single payer system, why doesn't the entire EU, since they use a common currency?
That may be a great plan of action, but again, that's a different debate for a different day. We want to fix this for our citizens because we're not serving them well.
Are we at zero? Does that matter?
Yeah, 16.
And yeah, actually that's all I have.
Okay.
Timer looks like a thermometer. That's 6 minutes. Correct?
Yeah.
Butter?
Yes, sir.
Judge? Audience. Awesome. All right, first and foremost, I want to say it's really great to be back in IPDA. It has actually been almost 3 years and about a month since the last time I've been in a tournament. I was away getting a PhD, and it's really fantastic to be back in the organization. In fact, I remember back when I was an undergrad and Bob was still really old, 15 years ago, that we used to actually prep in this room. So it's really cool to be back in this room, and for some reason, Peter's for me. And all of you watching online, hi, how you doing? And Bob, thank you for being here. That being said, let's get directly into the case because Bob and I are both old and we're probably going to fall asleep by the end of this. So, the resolution set out before us, the United States federal government should significantly reform healthcare. Bob is advocating, he's basically taking the full reform and advocating that we ought to do a single payer system. So, essentially we should scrap the existing model and go with this one. So he gives us like multiple weighing mechanisms thing, the idea of access, care, quality, and affordability. So let's look at his own weighing mechanism, his own standards here. Number one, in terms of affordability, I would point out Bob has a responsibility as the affirmative. He's like the prosecutor. He has to lay out his entire case in the first speech, can't come back later and be like, oh, I forgot to say this. He has to have the murder weapon, he has to have the evidence, the video of it happening. Bob, his own standard included affordability, but Bob, as far as I can tell, actually never says what this system's going to cost. He tells you what Germany's going to cost, but remember, we're not talking about Germany here. Germany is about the size of Texas. We have to increase this to the entire population of the United States, and the fact is, with a larger system, a larger bureaucracy, see, for instance, the VA and their healthcare system and how clogged it is and how many other people you have to employ, it can end up costing considerably more. Yes, lots of other countries have socialized healthcare. None of them are in the top 10 most populous countries in the world like we are. And that is inherently the problem here. We cannot take a small sample size and try to extrapolate it and assume it's going to be the same. Bob has his claim and he has his data, but he doesn't have any warrant. He doesn't have any basis to compare. For instance, let's say you have a headache. And McKinsey, wanting to be helpful here, says, here, Judge, take my Midol. That's her claim. Data always gets rid of my headaches. You gonna take the Midol? No, you're not, because there's no warrant, there's no comparison between one to the other. At that point, Bob is basically telling you, Judge, take this Midol. I'm not really sure what's gonna happen, but it works for women, so it'll probably work for your genetics too. Don't take that pill, because all Bob is being here is a snake oil salesman. He's taking a small sample and trying to extrapolate, and if you've taken a research methods class, you know that just doesn't work. So, 2, he gives this whole comparison thing, and over and over and over, it's only Germany he compares to. Why not Cuba? Why not Mexico? Why not any of these other places? You cannot sit there and cherry pick the country where it's working out the best. How about Greece? How's their economy doing? They have socialized healthcare. You know, if I want to make a comparison, I could be like, oh, well, you know, I can pick anything, but we have to look at the entire scope. He can't just give you one country of non-comparable size who has a different economic system than we do. You know why? Because Germany has a semi-socialist government system. We put it in after World War II. In Germany, it is required by law that companies' boards of directors have a certain percentage of floor workers on them. VW, for instance, has this. That's the law there, not the law here. We resist socialism in this country, they embrace it, so when Bob makes this comparison, it's a completely different system. Then he talks about this myth and the idea of rationing, right? Well, rationing is not the only response, and he talks about that, but I asked him about that information. He says, it's a greater number here, so we have less doctors per people, and we have a lot more people. Fact is, if you have insurance, and you've been to a doctor, and you're ready to pay the doctor, how long does it take you if you show up on time for your appointment to be seen by the doctor? And how much attention do you get now? And that's paying him with real money. He's getting rich off you. Imagine if he gets a set amount. Try going to a free clinic. See how long that takes compared to when you are paying for. The fact is, when you overload a system with people, it's like going to Walmart at night. When they only have a couple of the cashiers open compared to the stuff, you know how long those lines can get? That's the system Bob says. There might not be rationing, but we don't have enough doctors, and we cannot create enough doctors to do the German system. So let's look at some reasons why we can independently reject this. Number one, these states will resist this. Bob, as the affirmative, has the right to fiat and say Congress will pass this plan. Congress also passed the Affordable Care Act. The states actively refused to participate, frustrated, charged with lawsuits, wasted a lot of time, tried to repeal it, like dozens and dozens of times. That's costing a lot of money. By the way, Bob never tells you how much money this is actually going to cost. Number two, they're going to sue under the 10th Amendment, and they'll probably win. Just because Bob can pass a law under fiat doesn't mean that law is constitutional. If that gets struck down, we've wasted a lot of time. Number three, instability. The fact is the healthcare system is already reeling. We've had a giant, massive change to the tax code. We've changed the healthcare laws. We've tried to repeal them over and over. And what Bob is doing, we're playing a game of Jenga, and Bob is taking a sledgehammer to the Jenga thing and hoping it'll stay up. We cannot make this massive of a change. For these reasons and many more, I ask for a negative ballot for the first time. Stand down for cross-examination.
Judge, ready? Let's start here at the end. You talk about the healthcare system is reeling. How many deaths do we need to have before it's worth addressing that reeling healthcare system?
I was about to say, I think we should address it. I think we should enforce the ACA as currently existing. I think what we shouldn't do is do something that's going to jeopardize all of those lives by creating a completely different system and knock it over.
Okay, so the ACA system of care is sufficient then?
If the states would actually cooperate, but that is a minor repair. Basically, if you have a gym membership and you start going, that's not significant reform. You're just using the existing thing for what it's designed for.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you. Judge, ready? 3 minutes, still thankful, but a lot to get through here on the flow. If we go in the same order, off the very top, Adam talks about the affordability, that ultimately we've got to discuss the cost that's associated with this. And in the contention 2 analysis, what it does is it shows both the potential for the decline in costs that's associated with this, when you look at the amount of spending per citizen that's less than half in the German model. But even if you believe we're going to continue to spend the exact same amount on this, what we get is the increased quality of care. Remember the analysis in the number of days of lives that are associated with every $100 spent and how it's dwarfed. And the reason being is because the gaps in the coverage within our system, because of the people that do not have access to coverage, and because of the multi-payer system and the inherent flaws that are present within it. Now the second point that he says here is, look, we only compare to Germany, why not compare to others? And he gives us the laundry list that's here. And that reason that there's only the data comparing to Germany, because that's the model that the affirmative's advocating for, is that we take the German model. Now I don't have time to discuss all the details in a 5-minute speech to lay out a very complex plan, which is done here. But what I've done is, rather than choosing some hypothetical of saying, well, we should go to a system of universal health care, we've chosen one that is in existence, that is working on the planet, and saying we're going to copy that identically to our nation at this point in time. And so that's an ultra-specific plan of action that's taking place. He mentions that, well, we resist socialism. And I say, yeah, absolutely, that's a difference. This resistance to socialism, and what we need is absolutely the socialistic model. That's the plan the affirmative is advocating in this case, is this form of socialistic medicine. Now, off of the myths analysis, he says, look, if you got insurance and you're ready to pay, how long you have to wait, how long you think it's going to take in this circumstance? Remember, the data clearly shows the increase in the quality of care. That's the contention to data. The answer is, it's all good. It's going to work for us at a better level, and we see the results. You know, Winston Churchill once said, no matter how beautiful the strategy, you got to occasionally look at the results. And that's the results that we have here, where we show with things like 5-year cancer survival rates, 5-year leukemia survival rates, the number of people that skip treatment due to the expense, where Germany significantly outperforms the US in all these different circumstances. When you look to the off-case analysis, he tells you, look, the states are going to resist like they did with the ACA lawsuits. Does that mean we shouldn't try? Does that mean we should allow 44,789 excess deaths each year because, the courts might have to do their job? We might have to defend ourselves against people that don't see the big picture on this issue? Of course not. We agree that there's no number of lives that we should let die before we're willing to take an action in this direction. He says the healthcare risk system is reeling, and I thoroughly agree. That's why we shouldn't continue to try to put a Band-Aid on this problem. What we need to do is this comprehensive overhaul. What we need to do is to fix it once and for all. What we need to do is to put our citizenry first. Remember, as Cronkite once said, America's healthcare system is neither healthy, caring, nor a system. It's time that we get it right. It's time that once and for all we fix this. And so for the second time today, I ask that you concur and side with the affirmative.
Everybody ready? Judge?
Yes.
Once again, feel like we just met, and now we're saying goodbye, because this is my very last speech, but I really appreciate you being here, and I can't believe I didn't compliment your mohawk earlier, because that's awesome. Bob can't grow one of those. Anyway, thank you to Bob for a very spirited round. These are the type of rounds that make IPDA, I think, the greatest debate organization out there. Because we're not sitting here about the technicalities, and you didn't probably argue this shell, we're talking about the real issues. And to my student who's filming this right now, and to everybody watching online, thank you for being here too. All right, so with all of that said, let's get directly into the case, and I'll give you some reasons throughout why you can feel very, very comfortable voting with the negative here today. Now, keep in mind, I want you to remember the last thing Bob said, because Bob is a great speaker. He's a great emotional speaker. He gets up here, he says, it's time to put our citizens first. I've seen Bob do great speeches, but this is just a speech. The fact is, put citizens first is much like saying, make America great again. It sounds good on paper, but it doesn't actually do what's promised. Now, Bob says, oh, we just need the court system to defend this stuff, and we need to enforce this stuff. Socialism is a good idea, but if people resist it and don't adopt it, it's not going to work. Under Bob's logic, when we passed the Emancipation Proclamation or the Civil Rights Act, we must have solved racism, because look, we passed a law and no one could possibly ever resist a law. But they do, and they continue to do so. Currently, in my home state of Texas, I now live right here in Arkansas, the Attorney General Ken Paxton is suing a black student for refusing to stand up for the pledge, despite the fact in 1943 the Supreme Court ruled that schools can't do that. Texas says, screw the Supreme Court. We're going to resist this. And if Bob thinks that we can enforce it using the courts, look at what Donald Trump is doing. All they have to say is states' rights, you can't tell us what to do. And even though they're wrong, that doesn't stop them from doing it. Now look at the fight they put up with the ACA. It called it socialism. Bob is advocating we pass something of actual socialism. If you think Ted Cruz is going to take this line down, you are wrong. And that's my point. Bob can say we should pass this plan. We debate as if the plan's been passed, but you could fiat the ACA too, but we saw what happened there. Second, so that's the first voter. people will resist and it will become worse. The reason healthcare insurance rates skyrocketed under the ACA was not because ACA was bad, it was because people resisted. Bob gives you no reason to think they won't do it now. Number two, there is no adequate comparison. Remember the Maidol analogy. Bob is taking a similar-ish thing, which he admits is different. He says, you're right, we resist socialism here where Germany doesn't. We need socialism. Well, at that point, we have a different economic system than we do. They are much smaller than us. He is the affirmative, he is the burden of proof, he is the prosecutor. As a defense attorney, I don't have to prove it won't work. All I have to prove is Bob didn't do a good enough job proving it did. If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. If Bob didn't prove his case, you must vote neg. And Bob simply did not do the work here today to prove his case. He's advocating for the German model. That's like me saying, hey, this rule I have for my debate team should be followed by all of IPDA. It works with my 5-6 kids. It should work for all the people in the Southern District and also the Northwestern District. And in China and in Afghanistan, everyone should follow this rule because it works for my team. That's the analogy Bob is making. He offers you no reason to think this is going to work. He just tells you a bunch about people dying and acts like his magic pill is going to fix it. But we don't know that's the case. It is much better to take the system we have now and actually make it work as best we can than to take a struggling system. Because if you've been hit by a car, that's not the time for an experimental surgery that could kill you. Wait till it heals up. Now is not the time. Bob threatens to bankrupt this healthcare system because he wants to try an experiment while we're already reeling. How many people have to die for us to realize we should just fix what we have now?
Thank you for not stealing my pick. You dirty
Yeah.
socialist. Judge ready? Last opportunity to speak, and so once again, thanks for evaluating around Adam. Outstanding job. I expected nothing less in this circumstance. You know, ultimately what we've got in this round, I think Adam does a great job of providing analysis to you. I hope that you found my analysis to be sufficient as well. But it's not just about the analysis, it's about the data that goes along with that analysis. And remember, the data that the North Carolina Medical Journal says the U.S. spends the most in the country. The data that UCLA says that we're 22nd out of 27 of our peers that we're compared with. The OECD that says that Germany gets it better and they get it better cheaper. When you're ultimately looking for that tiebreaker analysis of which is going to provide better for the citizens, clearly taking that German model is going to work better for us. And so at the top here, Adam says, look, putting citizens first sounds good, but it doesn't do as promised. And so the advocacy of the negative is to keep the same system, to keep the system that results in 44,789 excess deaths each year, to have this decreased quality of care, this decreased quality of life for our citizenry. I say no, we do need to take this change that can make things better for us. He says, look, states are going to resist this. Even if states will resist a plan that potentially could save you money, if states will resist a plan that could potentially save your life, I say, well, let's not, the advocacy of let's not fight with the states, let's start and fight for the people, the ones that matter in this circumstance. If you're against saving lives and saving money and doing so in a way that improves the quality of life of our citizens, I say, yeah, we'll be willing to fight for it. But that's a different issue for a different time. The issue at hand is that one of whether or not we need to reform the healthcare system or whether or not this is the way to do it. We've conceded that the German model, yeah, that it works better than what we're doing. When we look to the applicability, this is one of the world's largest economies that we're applying this to. And so we can see, well, it can be analogous. even if we believe that we're not going to get the same dollar cost savings. Remember the OEC data that Germany spends $4,297 a citizen to US spending $98.92. Even if we believe we're going to continue to spend that same $98.92, remember the rest of the analysis that what they're getting from the single payer system is the better quality of care that results overall. Remember the analysis that they're getting part of that savings from decreasing the administrative costs, that we don't have to file with multiple payers and multiple systems that come into play, but we have this singular system where we tie it together, and the goal becomes not bureaucracy, not a goal of let's set the citizens aside and continue to do the same things as usual because that's the easy route, but the goal becomes doing what's best for our people. And so for the final time today, I ask that you concur and side with the affirmative. Thank you.